All right, we have a number of different new Nintendo Switch 2 stories to unpack today, starting with an explanation of the newest system firmware update. If you have noticed recently, if you booted into your Switch 2, there is now a new system update available. And while the official patch notes are not very exciting on the surface for this update, there is actually one under the hood thing that has come to light. If you were having certain issues with particular games when it comes to backwards compatibility, it might be worth revisiting them now post update because it does appear that some of that stuff was patched. In addition to, in the same story, I kind of want to also include a mysterious update for Mario 3D All-Stars, the software that went live. So Nintendo doing some stuff behind the scenes to get the Switch 1 games running better on Switch 2. Then we have a ton of new Donkey Kong Bananza details, but we are right around the corner from launch, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on all of the ins and outs, and there's leaks and spoilers floating around online. But I do want to point out one article piece that basically highlights an actual screenshot of what this game would have looked like if it came to Switch 1, and kind of just the overall sentiment of how ready developers were for the power of Switch 2 and how it really made certain games that just otherwise wouldn't have been possible in their same form come to life on this new generation hardware. So I want to highlight that. There is some new information for DragX Drive and a global jam demo event that's taking place on some specific dates and times that you can actually hop into and check out this game for free. This launches on August 14th, so you'll want to know about it ahead of time. We have an interesting story floating around from the 007 First Light team and just how easy it was to get that game over to Nintendo Switch 2 with the power of the current generation console. Some unfortunate news I want to highlight for Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D remake fans, because if you were planning on getting this game for Switch 1 and maybe taking advantage of something like an upgrade pack, well, it doesn't appear like that's going to be an option on the table this time around. So we'll break down all of this info, but before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first kick this off over at Universo Nintendo, where they do outline the new Nintendo Switch and Switch 2 system firmware update and some official patch notes. Then we have to hop over to Oatmeal Dome to get kind of some of the under the hood stuff that's actually taking place here with this update. So Nintendo Switch 2 and Nintendo Switch have firmware updated to version 20.2.0 patch notes. And you have here the official version patch notes straight from Nintendo's own website is fixed an issue that prevented parental controls from being transferred from Nintendo Switch to Nintendo Switch 2 under certain circumstances during a console transfer. Fixed an issue where it was not possible to proceed beyond searching for networks in internet settings and system settings. And then general console stability improvements to enhance the user experience. And if you've been around on the Nintendo Switch generation for a long time, like I have since the launch of the console, you know that general console stability improvements to enhance the user's experience is 9 times out of 10 what we get out of these system updates, especially if there isn't a big number change or anything like that. Sometimes even if there is a number change, it's really nothing notable. Whenever we go to like version 21 of the software, you'd expect now that we're in a new system generation that maybe we'll get some more notable updates earlier on. And on the surface, like I mentioned, this one doesn't seem too interesting, but that is where Oatmeal Dome comes into the conversation, because this is a well-known data miner, and they posted up over on X something you might want to know if you're playing a lot of games from your Switch 1 catalog and have potentially noticed any issues with those games, because you have here from Oatmeal Dome outlining Nintendo Switch 2 system firmware update version 20.2.0 fixes problems with Switch 1 backwards compatibility. I can personally confirm that Portal 2 no longer crashes after updating. If you have problematic games, update your console and try them out. So this is the big one here, and the main reason I wanted to highlight this update is we do know that the way that Nintendo went about backwards compatibility this generation is through like a hybrid between an emulation slash real-time code translation, as the developers described it, but essentially it's running off of the brand new custom T239 NVIDIA chipset. There's not a Tegra X1 that's in there acting like a whole separate Switch 1 inside of the Switch 2. So there are inherently going to be compatibility issues with certain games. And we've talked about at length in the past on the channel, the backwards compatibility update list. Most of the first party Nintendo content seems to be completely fine at this point. And then there's a handful of third party games that just had some different issues pop up within them. They're slowly making progress on that list. But as time went on, they did continue to chip away at the major games that wouldn't start and just had game-breaking issues and stuff like that. But if you noticed any wonkiness in any of your Switch 1 titles that you were playing on Switch 2, you might do this system firmware update, then hop back into those and check them again. And one game that should actually have a guaranteed update of some sort in terms of performance and functionality, and maybe if you were running into issues with it before, it should maybe now hopefully be fixed. As you can see this over from Nintendo Life, where it says Super Mario 3D All-Stars updated to version 1.1.3 improves gameplay on Switch 2. So the official patch notes for this one is several issues have been addressed to improve gameplay on Nintendo Switch 2. A note software update is required to play on Nintendo Switch 2. So there was apparently some issues with how this particular game, 3D All-Stars, was running in terms of how it was programmed and designed to run on Switch 1 compared to Switch 2. And if you were playing through Mario 64, Sunshine, and or Galaxy and noticed any kind of strange performance hiccups or just glitches, things where maybe the game force crash and stuff like that, update your game. It should be good. Still kind of blows my mind that Nintendo had, a 10 million plus seller on their hands with Mario 3D All-Stars. They basically did that in 6 months, or maybe 9 months, maybe the full year. I can't remember exactly how long they sold it for, but then they just pulled it off the shelves and you can't buy it anymore, other than the, obviously circulating physical copies left still floating around out there, because you can still get your hands on those, although prices are going up over the course of time. I hope that as part of the 40th anniversary, maybe Nintendo brings this back and just packs in Galaxy 2 as an additional remaster. We'll have to wait and see what happens with any of that, but now that it does seem to have any of the bugs and issues fixed, it might be a good time to hop back into this 3D Mario collection, considering that we might be waiting a little while for the next mainline 3D Mario, especially considering that the Odyssey team's handprints are all over the upcoming Donkey Kong Bonanza. But some new updates to check out, both from a system firmware update perspective, as well as a particular game getting updated, one that you can't buy anymore, but that I know a lot of Switch owners do have in their library. And in case you want to check that out on Switch 2, go ahead and update it first, then hop in and see if you notice any enhancements. I want to then highlight next kind of a cool story from the Donkey Kong Bonanza development team, because obviously we are in launch week. In fact, the day you are seeing this video, we should know about the review scores of Donkey Kong Bonanza, and I will have my own video going up with it tomorrow with my initial hands-on and gameplay impressions. Cannot wait to dive into this game. But one thing I want to highlight is just kind of the power level of the Switch 2 and what that's now essentially allowing developers to do with their creative vision for the game, because we learned earlier on that this game was originally going to be a Switch 1 title. It then got moved to Switch 2, and we now have kind of the time frame in when that happened, and we also have a really interesting look at what this game would have looked like if it did end up launching on Switch 1 as opposed to 2. At least on some level you can kind of make out more or less what it would have looked like at or near its finalized stage of development. So anyway, right over here at Go Nintendo, you can see Nintendo on Donkey Kong Bonanza, originally planned as Switch 1 game. Switch 2 allowed for expanded voxel technology and destructibility and more. And then so you have kind of a long piece of different bullet points here, but some more towards the bottom is where I actually want to start to highlight them. And I will have this linked in the description down below if you want to go through all of this and ask the developer. Multiple part interview has been published, so there's lots of new details you could dive into. But Donkey Kong Bonanza was originally planned as a Switch 1 game, but got moved to Switch 2 around 2021. Switch 2 allowed the game to have more objects for players to destroy and gave increased memory and processing capacity for ideas that wouldn't work on Switch 1, such as explosions and large objects collapsing. The Switch 2 would also allow the game to run at 60 FPS, making the sense of destruction more satisfying. The developers worked hard to ensure voxels looked as smooth and realistic as possible to enhance the surprise for their destructibility. Foley sound effects for the destruction were created by hand to make sure they would be pleasant to listen to and not repetitive, with lots of variation and some programming randomness to keep things interesting. Designing levels was a challenge to allow for multiple routes players could use to reach their goals and maintain the structure of levels while allowing for destruction and exploration. So a lot of stuff to pull off here, and while this is a very low resolution image, and I will go ahead and take my camera off screen here so you guys can see it a little bit more zoomed in, this on the left is essentially graphics assessment for the development of the Nintendo Switch system. So kind of a quick look at what it would have looked like if we maybe got this game brought to Nintendo Switch as opposed to Switch 2. And then you just see kind of the day and night difference in the level of detail, what is on screen and in the world, what's rendered as far as the grass and plants and all of that stuff. The lighting effects clearly way different, and they were targeting maybe getting this game to run at a solid 30 frames per second on the original Nintendo Switch, and then with destruction elements and stuff like that they were going for, they were going to have a hard time pulling it off at a stable 30 FPS. So definitely one of those games that on paper just makes a lot of sense to move to Switch 2. I'm glad that we ended up seeing that be the case with what Nintendo did. And, you know, while some online will make a case for the fact that it's interesting that these Switch 2 launch games are actually both originally developed for the Switch 1, does that mean that when some of these games going forward are just originally from the ground up developed for the Switch 2, that they're going to look that much more impressive? On some level, yes, but both of these games kind of got morphed into their Switch 2 versions early enough into their development. I feel like that this is still going to be kind of what to expect from a graphical showcase from Nintendo for the most part. The Zelda team's going to probably push this to another level. The next Metroid Prime game also pushing things to another level with the Switch 2's power, I'm sure. Some games and devs tend to just really take things to another level, but I am definitely happy to see Donkey Kong Bonanza running at a solid 60 FPS for Switch 2 with a much better overall visual look to it than what we maybe would have got if it was brought to Switch 1. So from here, we have an update for the August game for Nintendo Switch 2, where you can see back over at Go Nintendo, Drag X Drive Global Jam demo event takes place August 9th through the 10th, 2025. Welcome to the Jam, and you have Drag X Drive, the 3-on-3 sports title, will be coming to Switch 2 on August 14th, 2025. This is going to be a digital-only release and will be priced at $20. If you're on the fence about this one or can't wait to play it, good news. You're going to have the chance to try out the game a few days early. Nintendo has announced that they'll be holding a Drag X Drive Global Jam demo event that will take place on August 9th and 10th before the game's release. Here's the exact schedule for the weekend. So this is Eastern time based off the US. You can do the conversion wherever you're at. Saturday, August 9th, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern time. Saturday, August 9th, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern time. Sunday, August 10th, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern time. So this is something that it doesn't sound like this game is getting a full-scale eShop demo where you can just check it out at any time. I definitely think that should be the move that Nintendo would do, because while this is a $20 digital only release and it's not, you know, one of their massive 2025 games or anything like that, it's still a first party title that I think a lot of people will be on the fence about unless they get a chance to play it. And I guess this is something of maybe like a server test for Nintendo / is something like a demo event for people to check out the game early. Listen, I'll probably hop into this and check it out. I may share my thoughts on it on the channel with you. This is not one of those games that it's like highly anticipated for me or anything like that. But I will at least hop into the gameplay and see if it hooks me. At the very least, you know, it's going to be kind of one of those fun experiment games for mouse controls on the Joy-Cons, and kind of seeing what that looks like and the creative vision that Nintendo came up with this game. But yep, wheelchair basketball, aka Drag X Drive demo event early 9th and 10th of August ahead of the actual game's launch, and hopefully at some point we see Nintendo just do an across the board eShop demo. Okay, next up, IO Interactive Director says it was quite easy to bring 007 First Light to Switch 2, promises Hitman performance update. It helps to have Q on your team. And then we'll just get kind of right into the quote here where it says, first of all, we have an amazing engine, the Glacier engine, and one of its strengths and why we love to keep using it at IO Interactive is that it enables us to bring a game to as many platforms as possible with limited friction. So in that aspect, it's quite easy for us as long as there's a new platform coming out to bring a game on it. As far as the Switch 2 goes, Nintendo has always been a great partner with us. We had brought Hitman as a cloud version to the first Switch, and now the Switch 2 is a powerful device, powerful enough for us to bring First Light to it natively. Of course, that's what we want to see, not cloud versions. They did also address some performance issues going on with Hitman on the Switch 2 and essentially promised that over the summer that they will have some kind of update to hopefully fix some of those performance issues that are hitting Hitman right now. So if you notice any of those, there seems to be a patch in the work, but it does, highlight the fact that developers are new to Switch 2 hardware. They kind of admittedly are learning things as they go with this hardware, and it does seem like some stuff that at launch may have been problematic, like a Hitman being a launch title for Nintendo Switch 2. It does look like they can patch some of that stuff out as they get a more in-depth understanding of how the development works on Switch 2, and just seeing again yet another studio kind of harp on that exact same tone, which is that this is easy to bring to Switch 2. It's not something like we saw in Switch 1, where developers were saying we may need to delay the Switch 1 version of this game, like Hogwarts Legacy got like a 6-month delay. They're jumping through all types of hoops just to get the game up to some kind of minimum standard that's acceptable. Now we're in a situation where we're seeing port studios such as Virtuos and now IO Interactive use terms like, it was easy to bring this modern generation game to Nintendo Switch 2 without any problems. That's what we like to hear, and I'm personally interested in 007 First Light because all the nostalgia for the James Bond franchise over the years. Some of them have had great installments, other ones not so much. This one looks promising to me from what we've seen so far. We need to see a lot more gameplay in detail, uncut and stuff like that, but as we get closer to, I believe it's 2026 launch, I'm sure we'll learn plenty more about it, and this is one I'll be watching here on the channel for sure. So finally, to close this out, some bad news. No easy way around this story. Just one of those unfortunate situations with kind of the era we're in with getting a Switch 1 version and a Switch 2 version of the same game in some cases. And while some developers and publishers have handled this in a great way and provided an easy upgrade path, other ones have quite literally done the opposite and provide no upgrade path. And at least before potentially you submit your pre-order, you know what to expect with the Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD situation, because you can see here from VGC, Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake won't offer an upgrade path to Nintendo Switch 2. Save data won't transfer between the Switch Dragon Quest games either. So you have, in a post on the Dragon Quest website, Square has confirmed that the Nintendo Switch version of the game and the Nintendo Switch 2 version of the game are being treated as entirely separate, and as such won't have any compatibility or upgrade path. There is no upgrade path currently available or planned. Please buy your copy for whichever system you would like to play it on, it said. Square notes that both versions of the game have the same content. However, each version has different graphical specifications based on the hardware's processing capabilities. Further down in the FAQ, Square Enix confirmed that the save data from the Nintendo Switch version of the game won't transfer to Nintendo Switch 2. No, the Switch 2 version and the Switch version are treated as separate games, so save data cannot be transferred or shared between them. This also applies to transferring data from the Switch 2 version to the Switch version. It has been confirmed that Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake will be a game keycard when it releases later this year. This is kind of just a worst case scenario here. You just have to pick the system you want it for. If you're a physical collector though, and you thought maybe, hey, there's a best of both worlds type of thing on the table here, I can buy the on-game cartridge experience for the Switch 1, then purchase an upgrade path, or maybe in some cases like we've seen, certain games, Tony Hawk's 3+4, if you own that digitally, you just get the new game for, let's say you own it on the Switch 1, you get the Switch 2 version at a full discount as part of the eShop if it registers that you own it for the Switch 1 digitally. So kind of cool stuff like that some developers have done. It appears that Square's not planning on doing this. They're letting you know that ahead of time. And essentially, because of the game keycard situation for the Switch 2 version, there's no way to get an on-cartridge experience if you are a physical collector for the Nintendo Switch 2. Whereas you could have done it with Switch 1 via backwards compatibility. You could still do that, but you are going to play the graphically downgraded version of the game, which granted, this is a 2D HD remake. Maybe it won't look, that less subpar or anything than the Switch 2 version. But I still think that if you want the highest, possible visual settings, it would have been nice if Square just solves for some kind of upgrade path here. But because upgrades are a thing that is kind of up to the developer and publisher at the end of the day, this is just one of those that will be left out of the fold. So whenever you are choosing to maybe pre-order this game, if you want to, by the time it comes out in October later this year, just make sure you get the version you're going to want to play through, because no upgrades this time around. But Let me know what you make of all the different stories we covered today in the comments down below. Have you updated your Switch 2 yet? And have you noticed any better performance on backwards compatibility games after the update? What do you think about Donkey Kong Bananza originally being planned as a Switch 1 game? And are you happy that it launched on Switch 2, or would you have preferred to see it come out on Switch 1? What do you think of Drag X Drive so far with what you've seen? And will you be checking out this global demo event that they're going to be running for specific dates? Are you hyped for 007 First Light? And are you interested in Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D remake at all? And what do you think about some games on Switch 2 having upgrade paths and other ones just skipping out on it entirely? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.